The rain hadn't stopped all evening, drumming against the windows in a steady rhythm. I was about to turn in for the night when my phone buzzed with a short, apologetic message from him. His car had broken down a few miles away, and the nearest mechanic wouldn't be open until morning. He'd been an old friend for years, someone I trusted enough to invite without hesitation, so I told him to come over. By the time I opened the door, he was soaked through, hair damp, coat heavy with water, the faint scent of rain and cold air clinging to him. I handed him a towel, and he smiled with gratitude, shaking his head at the mess he'd brought in with him. The house felt warmer with another presence, though my husband was away on a week-long business trip. I made tea, and we sat in the kitchen, the steam rising between us. Our conversation started light, touching on work, mutual acquaintances, and the ridiculous weather, but it drifted into memories of years past. Moments from when we were both younger, freer, perhaps more reckless. He had a way of remembering details I'd long forgotten, and every laugh we shared seemed to linger a fraction longer than it should have. I caught myself noticing the tone of his voice, the way it dipped slightly when he spoke directly to me, how his eyes didn't wander when I was talking. It was subtle, almost innocent, but the awareness of it pressed quietly at the edges of my thoughts. He glanced toward the hallway and asked where he'd be sleeping. I led him to the guest room, flicking on the small lamp beside the bed. He set his bag down, murmuring something about being grateful for the last-minute rescue. As I turned to leave, he stood there, hands in his pockets, his gaze holding mine just a heartbeat longer than polite conversation would allow. The guest room door closed softly, though I noticed it didn't latch completely. I went back to my room, trying to ignore the faint echo of his voice in my mind. The rain continued against the glass, the rhythmic patter only amplifying the quiet of the house. I lay down, telling myself there was nothing unusual about any of this, that offering help to a friend was the simplest thing in the world. But even as I closed my eyes, I could still feel the warmth of his earlier smile, and the awareness that somewhere down the hallway, just beyond that slightly open door, he was there, close enough to reach, yet far enough to remain untouched. And for reasons I couldn't name, that distance felt like the most fragile thing in the world. Sleep didn't come easily. I shifted beneath the sheets, my mind replaying fragments of our conversation in the kitchen. His laugh, warm and unhurried. The way he'd leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, as if nothing in the world mattered except the moment we were sharing. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I'd known him for years and any sense of tension was just in my imagination. Still, the silence of the house seemed too loud, every creak in the walls amplified. Somewhere in the distance, a floorboard whispered underweight. I held my breath, listening. The sound came again, slow, deliberate, then stopped. I turned onto my side, facing the door, telling myself it was nothing, maybe just the house settling. Minutes passed, or maybe it was longer, before I caught another faint sound, the soft thud of a drawer closing, followed by the muffled scrape of footsteps returning down the hallway. I sat up, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. My bare feet met the cool floor, and I hesitated, wondering if I should ignore it. But curiosity tugged harder than reason, and I found myself stepping into the hall. The dim light from the street lamp outside spilled just enough into the narrow space, turning everything into shadows. His door was still ajar, a thin sliver of warm light cutting across the carpet. He appeared in the hallway almost at the same moment I did, and we both paused. There was nothing in his expression that I could clearly name, but the quiet between us felt heavy, full of unspoken things. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, his voice low enough that it barely reached me. I shook my head, forcing a small smile. He didn't look away. For a moment, it felt as though the night itself had shrunk to the few feet between us. We stood there longer than was reasonable for such a simple exchange. I wanted to turn away, to return to my room, but my body didn't listen. The faint scent of rain still clung to him, mixed now with something warmer, more personal. He said something casual, commenting on the cold, on the weather, but his tone held an undercurrent that neither of us acknowledged. I gave a quiet reply, my voice steady despite the quickening in my chest, and then stepped back toward my room. The hallway returned to silence, yet the air felt charged, almost electric. I closed my door, leaned against it for a moment, and realized my pulse was still racing. The distance between our rooms had never felt so thin. I lay down again, But every time I closed my eyes, the image of him standing there, watching me in the half-light, refused to fade. Midnight blurred into the small hours, the kind of time when the world feels suspended and thoughts grow louder. I gave up on sleep and slipped out of bed, drawn by the idea of a glass of water, though I knew that wasn't what I was really seeking. The house was cool and still, shadows stretching long across the walls. As I padded into the kitchen, I caught movement in the corner of my eye. He was already there, leaning casually against the counter, a mug in his hand. We both stopped as if caught doing something we shouldn't, though neither of us could name what that was. His voice was soft when he asked if I couldn't sleep either. I shook my head, feeling the corner of my mouth lift in a faint, involuntary smile. He set his mug down, the quiet sound of ceramic against wood far too loud in the silence. The air between us shifted, becoming something that hummed with awareness. I moved toward the sink, the distance between us closing without intention. My hand brushed his as I reached for the faucet, the brief contact sending an unwelcome rush through me. His gaze lingered, steady, unreadable, yet charged enough to make my chest tighten. We spoke in fragments, words that seemed like excuses for the silence more than actual conversation. He told me I should be sleeping. I told him the same. Neither of us moved away. Time felt strangely elastic, each second stretched thin. His fingers drummed lightly against the counter, then stilled. My eyes flicked toward the doorway, as if checking for something, someone, though I knew no one was there. When I looked back, he had taken half a step closer, close enough that I could hear the quiet rhythm of his breathing. The faintest trace of a smile touched his lips, as though we were sharing a secret without speaking it. I felt the line between right and wrong blur into something dangerously thin. My heart beat faster, my thoughts tangled between caution and surrender. He reached past me for something on the counter, but his hand lingered near mine, close enough to feel the heat of his skin. The sound of a phone vibrating on the table cut through the moment, sharp and unwelcome. We both froze, glancing toward the source, and the spell broke, just slightly. I stepped back first, my hand tightening around the glass of water I hadn't touched. He straightened, gave a faint nod, and returned to his mug. Neither of us said another word. I turned and walked away, though every step back to my room felt heavy, like I was carrying something I couldn't name. The house was still the same, but I knew something in it had shifted, and there would be no going back to how it was before. Morning came too quickly, sunlight creeping through the curtains in thin, golden lines. The air in the house felt heavier than the night before, as if it remembered everything we weren't saying. I stayed in bed longer than usual, listening to the faint sounds of movement down the hall, drawers opening, the low thud of a bag being set on the floor. Eventually, I forced myself up and into the kitchen, where he was already sipping coffee, posture relaxed but eyes avoiding mine just enough to be noticeable. We exchanged polite words, the kind that fill space but mean nothing. I asked about his car. He said the mechanic would have it ready by late morning. He thanked me again for letting him stay, his voice even, steady, as though the hours between midnight and dawn hadn't happened. But every time our eyes met, there was a flicker, quick, almost hidden, that told me we both remembered far more than we would admit. As he moved past me to put his cup in the sink, his arm brushed mine. The contact was brief, accidental by any reasonable measure, yet it sent a sharp reminder through me. My fingers curled against my side, willing myself to stay composed. He lingered near the counter for a moment, as though searching for something to say, then simply offered a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. When the time came for him to leave, we stood by the front door. He adjusted the strap of his bag and thanked me one last time. I nodded, offering a casual safe travels, though my voice sounded unfamiliar to my own ears. He hesitated, then reached out, not for a handshake, not quite for an embrace, but something in between. The moment stretched, quiet but charged, before he stepped back and opened the door. The cool morning air rushed in, carrying with it the distant sounds of traffic and birdsong. He walked down the steps without looking back, and I stayed there, watching until he disappeared from view. Closing the door felt final, yet unsatisfying, as if I'd sealed something inside with me. I stood in the hallway, my gaze drifting toward the guest room. The bed was neatly made, everything in place, but it didn't look the same. The air still held the faintest trace of rain and his cologne, and for a moment I let myself remember the quiet tension of the night before, the brush of a hand, the closeness in the dark, the words left unspoken. I drew in a slow breath and turned away, knowing some lines, once blurred, never truly sharpen again. The day would move on, but the night had left its mark, tucked away where no one else would see it.